Welcome back, learners. Today we're going to study about the topic learning. Learning in psychology is different from what you understand by learning in English. The term learning has been defined by psychologists in many ways, as has been every other term. According to the most acceptable definition, however, it is a relatively permanent change in behavior or behavior potential resulting from experience. Now let's break it down into something simple. It says that this is a relatively permanent change. Let's understand what relatively is. Relatively means to quite a large degree, especially when compared to others. So relatively here you can substitute it directly with to a very large degree. So a permanent change of very large degree in behavior or the potential of behavior which results from experience. Experience is something that you have felt or that you have felt in the past, right? So the 3 points of this definition require clarification. The book says, first, as written in definition, relatively permanent change. It is important to mention here that any temporary change in behavior can be termed as learning, such as feeling sleepy after taking drugs or heavy meals, or feeling tired due to illness. Second, permanent change due to aging or maturation will not be considered as learning. So what they've done is they've written something and then contradicted it themselves, right? You might think that first they are saying permanent change comes under learning, but now they are putting even temporary change under learning, and some permanent change is not put under learning. So what they mean through this is that not all kinds of, they required a definition, and in that required definition permanent word suited the best. But it is also important to mention here that not all kinds of permanent changes can be taken into it without consideration, and even some temporary changes can be part of learning too. For example, like they've said that feeling sleepy after taking drugs or heavy meals, or feeling tired due to an illness, this can be termed as learning. So if you feel ill and you feel tired or you feel sleepy after taking some drugs, so your body knows that I'm gonna lie down and have some rest because I'm feeling very sleepy, I'm feeling very tired, I can't get up, I can't do work. And second is that there is some permanent change due to it aging or maturation, which is inevitable, that is bound to happen, you cannot stop it, right? And but that cannot be called a part of learning, because there is nothing to learn in it. If you're going to mature, if you're going to age up, it will happen whether you understand it or you don't understand it. There's no point in learning about it, and you cannot learn it, you cannot take it into consideration, yeah, that I'm maturing, I'm aging. That is a process that is completely natural and will be bound to happen. However, when you take some medicine and you start feeling sleepy, your body can learn it. Your body can learn to experience the feeling or the feelings of sleepiness or drowsiness after you take a medication. This is what learning is about. In one case, the process is going to happen. Your body cannot make it, your body cannot do it consciously, right? Your body cannot make you mature faster, make you age abnormally. But after you take a medicine, even if you weren't originally feeling sleepy or drowsy, after hearing this kind of experience from many different people, that you will feel sleepy, you will feel drowsy after taking this medicine, you will feel drowsy after taking this medicine. If you hear this from a lot of people, your body will start making you feel drowsy on its own, even if the medicine had no effect of drowsiness at all. So this is something that your body learned from experience. Whereas in the second case, there was nothing to be learned. There was nothing that your body could do after learning. And third here is experience. Experience does not only mean your own experience. Learning can also happen through vicarious learning. Vicarious learning means something that you have learned or learned by watching others or learning from their experience. To be precise, it means felt or experienced by watching or reading about somebody else doing something rather than doing it yourself. Okay, so this was vicarious learning. So I hope you keep these 3 points in mind. There has to be something to learn. You cannot learn a process that is bound to happen, that is inevitable and is going to happen. There is nothing to learn in such a process, even if that process is permanent, like in the second case. And some temporary processes can still be learned, even if if you don't, even if it is going to happen and you don't know about the process, it can still be learned. Now moving on to theories of learning. In this section, we will discuss various theories of learning, various theories explaining psychological processes involved in learning. Broadly, theories of learning can be categorized based on the following: learning by association, known as classical conditioning; learning by consequence, known as operant or instrumental conditioning; learning by watching others, known as observational learning. So, the simplest way to remember them is just remember these last names. The name of the first theory is classical conditioning, second is operant or instrumental conditioning, third is observational conditioning. So, underline them and mark them as one. The names, underline these names and mark them as one. And to understand how these processes take place or how they happen, then now move back to the first point. Classical conditioning is learned by association. Operant or instrumental conditioning, learned by consequence. Observational learning, learned by watching others. So mark these processes as two. So this is the first point. The name of the condition is first point. How it happens is the second point. So now you know that the condition's name is classical conditioning and the process's name is association. Now moving on, classical conditioning, learning by association. Association means associating yourself with other people. It means joining or working with another person or group of people, or a group of people or organizations who work together for a particular group. So what it means is working with people or joined with people. There are classical theories which explain that learning takes place by association. The theory is termed as classical conditioning theory. The theory of classical conditioning was proposed by Ivan Pavlov. According to this theory, we learn by making associations and relationships among various stimuli. Stimuli means object, but here these stimuli means living, breathing objects. So among various, or you can, in this case, you can constitute stimuli with people and animals. Okay, in to be more particular, you can just substitute the word stimuli with the people directly. So, according to this theory, we learn by making associations and relationships amongst various people. Before moving further, first we should know the famous experiment done by Ivan Pavlov. His experiment on dog laid the foundation of classical conditioning. Pavlov, a physiologist by profession, was working on the process of digestion on dogs around 1889. While measuring the salivation rate means how much saliva is produced by the dogs in a particular span of time. So this was the salivation rate, means how much amount of saliva did the dog produce, how much saliva did the dog let go in 1 minute, maybe in 1 second, whatever rate he decided of time. He observed that the dog often began to salivate when it could smell the food or even at the sight of their empty food pan. So what he found out, that the dog started salivating, that the dog started ral tapkana like. So the dog started doing this even when he only smelled the food. He didn't actually see the food. He didn't actually eat it. You know, right? Like in humans, if you might have, if you remember it, earlier we were taught in science that our mouths salivate to make the food soft and easier to swallow, right? So if this is the case, then it should only happen when the food has actually entered our mouth. So so the brain receives a signal that the food has entered and it's hard and it needs to soften down in order to chew it properly and swallow. And then the brain will give signal for our salivary glands to produce saliva, right? But in this case of this dog, and such is our case also many times, but in the case of this dog, what happens is the food hasn't entered its mouth. It's outside, and sometimes it's not even outside. Only an empty pan is there, or the smell of the food is there, but the dog has started salivating. The dog has started producing saliva. He conducted this study in 2 trials. He called his first trial as conditioning trial. During this trial, he presented a neutral stimulus. What is neutral stimulus? Neutral stimulus is something that has no effect on the particular body. A neutral stimulus that has no effect on the body that we are experimenting upon, right? No effect of any kind. So ringing of bell was immediately followed by an unconditioned stimulus. Now unconditioned stimulus is the actual stimulus. It's the thing, it's the part which has the effect, which produces any kind of effect on the experimented body. This, but why is it called an unconditioned stimulus, right? Stimulus is, the main thing is stimulus. Stimulus is something that produces a kind of effect, a kind of activity on you, that gets you active. Stimulus is something that causes activity or development or any kind of interest. So stimulus is the main thing here. But why unconditioned? Why add unconditioned to it? This is in response to the whole activity. You will understand it later why we added unconditioned. But I'll tell you in brief here. Unconditioned means that he was not taught to do it. He was not given prior training to act in this particular way as he acted after the ringing of the bell. So what they're saying is what the dog did after the ringing of the bell was not taught, or was not it wasn't what he was trained for. So he had no prior knowledge of how to act or how to react after the bell was rang. That's why the bell is termed as unconditioned stimulus. So something that made the dog to react naturally, that made the dog to react naturally or unconditionally. Unconditionally means he could have reacted in any kind of manner. There was no foundations on him. The food that had no effect on producing dog salivation. So in this case, the food is the unconditioned stimulus. The bell is the neutral stimulus, and the food is the unconditioned stimulus. You can write it down if you wish to. The food, which, and what effect did it had? It had the effect of producing the dog's saliva. The response that dog gave after getting food, that is after getting the unconditioned stimulus in the form of salivation, was termed as unconditioned response. So again, this is salivation is termed as unconditioned response. Why? Because this response is without any kinds of conditions, without any kind of foundations. The dog was not taught or trained to produce this particular kind of response. This was completely natural and on his own terms. So this is unconditioned. He wasn't taught to act in this manner, as the book even says, because it did not depend upon previous learning. This pairing of ringing of bell followed by food was done for a number of times. So what happened is that he repeated it a number of times. First he would ring the bell and then he would place the food. Ring the bell, place the food. So neutral stimulus plus unconditioned stimulus led to unconditioned response for a number of times. The pair of after this repetitive pairing, however, neutral stimulus, that is bell, acquired the characteristics of UCS, unconditioned stimulus, that is food. So the bell gradually turned into food for the dog. It's just a manner of saying the bell actually, he didn't actually start eating the bell, but the bell replaced what the food had, what the feelings the food had in the dog's mind. Let's just learn it through some example. So first, what was it? It was this bell plus food led to saliva, right? Bell plus food led to saliva. This was let's say done about 50 times. Now what happens to the dog? What happens to his mind? That whenever the bell starts ringing, now he expects that there will be food. There is going to be food. Whenever the bell is rung, he starts expecting food. So the bell has actually started working as a signal that food will be given to him now. The bell is the signal for food. So food, what was the food signal for? Food was the signal for saliva, right? Bell was the signal for food. Food was the signal for saliva. Now the dog has directly converted bell into into food. He is complete. Now there's no kind of signal. Now he doesn't actually think about that there is going to be food or there isn't going to be food. He knows naturally. He knows it for sure that if there is bell, there is food. And if there is food, then there is saliva. So after the ringing of the bell, he doesn't wait for the food to be actually placed before him. His mouth starts salivating by itself. Because it has become accustomed. It has become accustomed to expecting food after the bell is rung. So now in this case, after the bell is rung, he doesn't even wait for the food to arrive or come. He starts salivating even without food. He starts salivating without food. Because now his brain has accustomed to expecting it and starts producing saliva automatically. right? This is how the bell has taken the place of the food. And in this manner, the bell which was originally a neutral stimulus, the bell which was originally a neutral stimulus has now been changed. Since it has taken the place of the food, so it has now been changed into UCR, which is unconditioned. It has not changed into UCR, it has changed into unconditioned stimulus. So UCS, it's UCS here, unconditioned stimulus. And naturally, gradually it changed into conditioned, now conditioned response, because now the dog is expecting food, so he is producing a conditioned response. He has been conditioned to expect food. Earlier the dog was sometimes getting food, sometimes he wasn't getting food, so the bell had no meaning to food. But when he started receiving the food after the bell, so now his brain has become accustomed. Being accustomed means being conditioned. So now his brain has become conditioned to receive food after the bell is rung. Hence, now his response can be termed as a conditioned response. Earlier it was an unconditioned response, but now it is a conditioned response, because now he knows what is about to happen. Now he knows for sure, and that is why he is doing what he is doing right now. Earlier he didn't know what was going to happen, and it was natural process. But now he knows what is going to happen, and this is through his own means. This is not automatically now. This is he's being doing it manually. He's doing it himself. He's doing it conditionally. The neutral stimulus used by Pavlov in his experiment, that is bell, was termed by him as a conditioned stimulus, because now the bell has become a conditioned stimulus. The bell has been used to train the dog into this situation. Earlier the bell had no meaning to the dog, but now the bell has a meaning to the dog because of his past experience, because of the dog's past experience with the bell. So now the bell has become a conditioned stimulus. The most important thing to keep in mind is the meaning of conditioned. So if you still don't get it, be sure to remember to check it online, the meaning of condition. Unless you understand condition very expressively, you won't understand what this whole experiment or what the terms are about. So I'll just quickly tell you the meaning of condition here. Condition means to affect or control the way that somebody or something behaves. So earlier the bell had no effect on the dog, so it was unconditioned response because it did not affect the way the dog behaved. But now the bell affected the dog. It changed the way the dog behaved. It controlled the way that the dog behaved, so that's why it became a conditioned response now. And similarly, it led to a conditioned response. Because initially bell had no characteristics of producing salivation in dog, but later under certain condition, it acquired the ability to produce salivation in dogs. Right? Now moving on to the next theory of learning. Operant conditioning, consequence-based learning. Suppose you want to use principles of classical conditioning to teach a child to write. For this, first you need to identify an unconditional stimulus that will make the child write neatly. But since writing is not a reflex or any emotional behavior, therefore we cannot use classical conditioning to make someone learn writing. So what happens in this situation? Why can't you use classical conditioning to make someone write? Why? Because he does not know how to write. You cannot expect him to write on his own. Suppose you have never written, you didn't know about words, so how can you expect someone to start speaking in any language? Let's say you don't know French, so can you expect someone to start speaking in French because you're giving him something? First the person needs to learn French, only then he can start speaking in French or Chinese or Japanese or any other language, right? If you don't know anything about the language, just because you are given a reward, just because you're given some unconditional stimulus, something that stimulates something inside or something that you like, you can't just start blabbering in French and Spanish and some other certain languages, right? You need to be taught first what that language is, how to write it, how to read it, how to speak it. So in this case, that's why classical conditioning does not work, because this is not a reflex or emotional behavior. In this situation, therefore, we explore another form of conditioning that is called operant conditioning. In operant conditioning, this is the definition, this is the actual process of operant conditioning, so you can just write it down if you wish to. In operant conditioning, the end result or consequence of behavior determine if it will be repeated in the future or not. Operant conditioning can be defined as a principle of learning in which behavior is maintained or changed through its positive or negative consequences. So what they're saying is that the end result or the consequence of a behavior determines. So you behaved in a certain manner, and then in the end, or the consequence of that behavior will actually determine whether you will repeat that behavior or you will not repeat it. Suppose you went to a stray dog and started petting it, but the dog actually bit you. So now the end result here is that the dog bit you. The consequence of your behavior was that the dog bit you. So now what is about to happen? You will not repeat the same behavior in the future. The outcome of your behavior decided whether it will be repeated or not. So this here the outcome was negative, so the behavior will not be repeated. If the outcome was positive, the behavior will be repeated, but this is not always the same case. In some cases, even if the outcome is negative, the thing might be repeated, right? You can repeat it in negative. It's just the same like you add -2 plus -2. What does it lead to? It leads to -4. Or you can just say that you add 2 plus -2 and it will lead to 0, and you can just say that 2 minus 2 is equal to 0. So both are the same things. It's a bit complex, so we won't go into depth about it. Just read it from the surface. Operant conditioning can be defined as a principle of learning in which behavior is maintained or changed through its positive or negative consequences. So you can just allocate positive with repetition of behavior and negative with avoidance of behavior. According to the principles of operant conditioning, positive consequences lead to the repetition of behavior, like I said, whereas negative consequences will lead to avoidance of behavior. Factors that increase the probability of repetition of behavior have been termed as reinforcement. So here we won't just write positive factors, we will write any factor that leads to. You can just write it as a definition of reinforcement. What is reinforcement? Reinforcement is any factor that increases the probability of repetition of behavior. This is a reinforcement. So reinforcement is something that makes you repeat, reinforce, bring forth that same behavior again. Whereas factors that weakens or suppresses the targeted behavior has been termed as punishment. And what is punishment? Punishment is factor that weakens or suppresses the targeted behavior. This is punishment. Sometimes punishment goes the other way. Sometimes punishment makes you repeat that very same behavior, whereas reinforcement makes you give up that behavior. For let's say two children were fighting, and we pulled the children apart and told one child that told one child very positively, in a very calm, very loving, soothing manner, that child, it is not good to fight, you should avoid fighting, this will destroy your future. And we just taught him this some kind of things to reinforce a good behavior in him. So what is the likely result? The likely result is that the next time the child might not fight. The second case could be you pulled the child apart, you gave them a tight slaps, you taught him that the next time you fight I will break your legs and stuff like this. What do you think will happen? If it was a small child, then it's likely that he will avoid fighting. But if the child has gained some kind of consciousness, he has grown up a bit, then probably he will feel even more frustrated. He was even more likely to fight, because now he has a kind of revolting behavior inside him. The more you tell him, the more you punish him for something, the more likely he is to follow that very behavior, because it gives a kind of satisfaction to revolt. When the child has gained some kind of consciousness, when it has grown up, then the age for punishment has gone. Then he kind of revolts against the punishment. He is going to apply the same behavior that he has received punishment for. The same behavior is going to be repeated more likely than the behavior where reinforcement was given. B.F. Skinner was the main proponent of operant conditioning. He studied learning mechanism involved in voluntary behavior. Voluntary means which we do from our own thinking, which we do consciously with our own mind, and which we are not forced to do. Since voluntary behavior occurred when an organism operates on the environment. So, voluntary behavior only occurs when you operate on the environment. You can take any example, take any voluntary behavior. Let's suppose the simplest voluntary behavior is walking. Let's say you decided to walk to your friend's house, right? This is a voluntary behavior. So how is this related to operating in the environment? So what does environment consist of? Environment consists of everything that is around you and that affects you or interacts with you. So you will obviously go on the road, you start walking on the road. So what is road? Road is a part of environment. Road is what you interact with. So you operate on the environment, you're operating on the road. Let's say you decided to fetch a glass of water. So you get up, you stand, you start walking. What do you walk on? You walk on the floor. What do you drink the water? Drink the water in glass. What do you do with the water? You drink it. So you're continuously operating on the environment. So voluntary behavior occurs when an organism operates on the environment. He terms such voluntary behavior as operant. Thus, conditioning of operant behavior is known as operant conditioning. So, the conditioning of operant behavior was known as operant conditioning. This is pure bullshit. You don't even need to remember this much. It's only for studying purposes. Now, let's talk about the experiment done by Skinner. In his experiment, Skinner kept a hungry rat inside a closed chamber. The chamber had a lever. I think some of you might even have even have heard this story. It's very famous. This chamber had a lever which was connected to a food container kept outside. During exploratory behavior, while he was exploring it initially, so the rat started exploring its surroundings. So this is what is termed as exploratory behavior, the behavior of exploring your surroundings. Initially, rat pressed the lever accidentally. So in the starting, the rat pressed the lever by accident, leading to dropping of a food pellet. So which led to the dropping of a food pellet inside the chamber which he was kept. After a number of such accidental trials, so after the rat repeated these accidents sometimes, the rat learned the behavior of pressing the lever for a food pellet. So the rat gradually learned this behavior of pressing the lever led to the release of a food pellet. Conditioning was complete. Now the rat had learnt this from his experience. So now the rat was conditioned into this. Conditioning was complete when the rat presses the lever immediately after it was placed in the chamber, because now the rat knows for sure. Now the rat is completely expecting that this is what is going to happen when I press the lever, because his past experience has never failed. His past experience has always told him that if you press this lever, food will be given. So now the rat is completely conditioned. The rat completely understands what is going on and is no more ignorant of it. Here, lever pressing is an operant behavior and getting food is its consequence. So what is operant behavior? Operant behavior is the process. What is the process? The process is the pressing of the lever, the action. The action is the operant behavior. And what is the action? Action is the pressing of lever. And what is the consequence? The consequence is getting food. Since in this experiment, behavior of pressing lever was a medium or instrument of obtaining food, this type of learning is also known as instrumental learning. So the rat reaches the consequence through some kind of medium or some kind of instrument. Right? Let's understand it on here. Suppose this is you are standing here, okay, and you have to reach this island, and before this island there is this river, and in this river here there is a boat. Like always, mind my drawing because I know it's awfully rubbish. So the man gets into the river, he crosses the river and reaches the island, right? So the consequence is what? Consequence is reaching the island. The consequence is reaching the island. And how is it done? It is done through operating on the environment. What is the environment here? The boat and the river. So he operated on the environment, on the river, and reached his destination. Or you can say that he reached his destination through the means of the river. Let's say there was no boat, so he would just swim across here. See, so what happens is that this is the instrument. The river is the instrument. The river is the means through which he has reached his ends. So this means is called the instrument. And therefore it is known as instrumental learning. Now, observational learning. This is our third and last type of learning, operational learning. Observational learning. The main proponent of observational learning was Albert Bandura. Unlike classical conditioning and operant conditioning, according to observational learning, cognitive processes plays important role in learning behavior. Now, what is cognitive process? Cognitive means understanding what you are doing. It is connected with the process of understanding. So cognitive process means that you clearly understand what you are doing and why you are doing it. You are not ignorant of your action and its consequences. So this cognitive process, it means using your brain or mind to do something. So this kind of in this kind of behavior in this kind of conditioning, this cognitive process plays very important role. Based on his work with phobic patients and the famous Bobo doll experiment, that's why it's very hard to use this kind of learning on animals which have very low cognitive processes. Bandura propounded social learning theory. So he initially gave this the name the social learning theory. According to social learning theory, learning occurs in a social setting by observing others' behavior and its outcome. So according to social learning theory, what it means is whatever what we have been hearing for several years, that you learn by watching your parents, right? So what they say is that the child learns by watching his or her parents and how they react. So this is exactly what he's saying, that you learn by watching others and their behavior and what their behavior led to, what was the outcome of their behavior. This observational learning can occur in two ways. It says it occurs in two ways: direct observation and indirect observation. In direct observation, you learn behavior by observing others, called as model, directly. While in indirect observation, you learn by observing or hearing others' experience, right? So this is two kinds of outcomes of this learning. Sorry, not outcome, two kinds of modes of this learning. So in one case, you saw two people fighting each other, and the outcome was that both of them were hurt, right? So you learn directly. In this case, you directly learn from their behavior that their outcome led to nothing but hurting each other, but led to bruises and wounds. And in the second case, someone was telling you, your father or mother started preaching you like you shouldn't fight because fighting leads to negative impact on both the sides. Fighting is a loss to both the sides. Fighting is not good. So you can just learn from this. So you can learn from their experience, right? They experienced fighting during their time and they realized that what was the consequence of this, and they taught you directly, and then you learn from it. So this is called indirect observation, because you heard their experiences and you learn from it. So you learn through indirect observation. But more or less, indirect observation is incomplete because people are very less likely to believe indirect observation, because then you can spout any bullshit and then you are expecting the other person to believe it if it's an indirect observation. So mostly what happens is people first usually experience direct observation, and then to reinforce, to support the direct observation, indirect observation is added to it. This kind of indirect learning is known as vicarious learning. Vicarious, like I said, learn through other people's experience rather than by doing it yourself. Suppose you wanted to go on a trip to northeastern states of India. One of your friends who recently came back from her or his trip of northeast suggests you to carry umbrella or raincoat as it can rain anytime. Let's say your friend went to some foreign place, and you also wanted to visit that place, but when he came back he told you that if you want to visit the place, it's good, it's very well, but I advise you to bring an umbrella with you all the time because the weather is very unnatural and it can start raining anytime. So what will happen? Will you say, hey, stop trying to preach me, nobody asked for your advice, what the hell are you doing? No, you will most likely to believe it. You will say, yeah, okay, obviously he doesn't want to make fun of me. Besides, there's no point in saying such kind of things. Maybe it really does rain there. You will have these kinds of thoughts in your brain. And then you'll say, what's the harm in carrying umbrella? I can carry the umbrella. What does it even matter? So you're most likely to believe him. So there are very high chances that you will listen to his or her experience and carry an umbrella. This kind of learning is an example of vicarious learning. Now let us discuss the famous Bobo doll experiment. for an in-depth understanding of observational learning. Bandura and his colleagues conducted an experiment on children to investigate the role of observational and imitation in learning social behavior, such as aggression. So here they try to understand aggression, how aggression is affected through observation. They selected 72 children between the age group of 3 to 6 years. So they chose very young children, they chose toddlers. Children were randomly assigned to 3 groups, 1 control and 2 experiment groups. In one group of experiment, so you can say that they were put into 3 groups. In one group of experiment condition, children were shown a movie with an aggressive model beating, hitting and abusing a bobo doll. In other experimental condition, a non-aggressive model was shown playing peacefully and friendly with a bobo doll. Whereas in control group condition, the children were not shown any movie. So in one case, what happens is that the children are shown nothing, which is the control condition. In control condition, the children are shown nothing and just placed in a room. In the second case of which is in one of the cases of experiment conditioning, the children are shown a movie where the protagonist is shown to love the bobo doll, to play peacefully with it, make friends with it. And in the third one, in the second of the experimental conditioning, the man is shown to abusing, hitting, kicking the bobo doll, beating it, showing very aggressive behavior. So later on, all group of children were placed in a room which was full of variety of toys. It was observed that children who were exposed to aggressive model imitated the model's behavior. They also punched, hit and used abusive words for bobo dolls. In contrast, the children of second experimental group who were exposed to non-aggressive model did not demonstrate any aggression with bobo doll. This experiment was one of the landmark studies in psychology. It suggested that observation and imitation plays crucial role in learning. Further, according to Bandura, 4 processes are involved in observational learning: attention, retention, production, and motivation. So this is what set the cornerstone of imitation and learning through watching others. This is how this is how he actually proved that we do learn by imitating and watching others. We do learn from their experience. We deeply ingrain it into our mind and bring it out in our day-to-day activities. This is how he actually used an experiment and proved it. Further, he also observed that in observational learning, 4 factors are involved, which is attention, retention, production, and motivation. We don't need to go in depth about them. So if you want, you can just search them out in a dictionary and I guess you'll understand it. Besides, I think we've already covered attention previously. Anyways, that's it for today. In the next video, we'll cover, I think it will be the last topic of it, memory. Memory and thinking is also there. So in the next topic, we'll cover memory and thinking.